Hi guys, and welcome back to the Watch Scientist channel. It's Chris, and in today's video I will talk about why, in my opinion, the Omega Speedmaster Reduced is the best first luxury watch under 2000 euros. So of course there's a lot of different things to consider when calling something the best first luxury watch. And definitely you need to make your own choice on what's your best first luxury watch. If you have any suggestions around this price point, leave them in the comments below. I would be really interested to see them. And also, before I roll the intro, we have noticed that there's around 94% of our viewers who are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you enjoy our content or you enjoy this video, it would really help us out a lot if you would subscribe and like this video. Especially as we have some great opportunities coming up and some great new content we are really excited about. So stay tuned and let's roll the intro. First things first, this is the Omega Speedmaster Reduced. This is not the Omega Speedmaster Professional or the Moonwatch. So the easiest way to see if what you're looking at is an Omega Speedmaster Professional or the automatic is of course the text on the dial. If you stay on the dial, you can also see that the Speedmaster Reduced has numerals around the indices while the Professional does not. Other than that, there's the size. The Speedmaster Reduced has a little smaller size, that's why it's called Reduced, around 38 or 39 millimeters, while the Professional is more around 41, 42 millimeters, I think. So I bought this watch from Chrono24, and you can find these watches without boxes and papers for around 1600 euros. If you want them with box or with papers or both, you find them around 1900 euros. I bought mine with papers and without the box, as I think that the papers is the most important thing, and the box you can always buy afterwards, which is exactly what I did. So a little bit of history about this watch. This smaller variation of the famous Moonwatch has been released in 1988 by Omega, and they have produced various different iterations until 2003. Omega did release another Speedmaster Reduced in 2006 with a sapphire crystal, and this was the reference 3539.50.00 if I'm not mistaken, and it also was more close to the design of the Professional, as it didn't have the numerals on the hour markers as this one does. But this submodel of the Speedmaster Professional was then entirely discontinued in 2009. It should be said that you can still get a Speedmaster in a little smaller size in the form of the Speedmaster 38, but they are not as close to the design of the Moonwatch or the Professional, and they come in various different iterations. So as you probably know, with the Omega Speedmaster and also the Speedmaster Reduced, you should be very aware of the different model variations that exist when you want to buy this watch. So now I want to talk about the watch in general and why, in my opinion, this was the best fit for me as my first luxury watch. So this watch specifically is the reference number 3510.50.00, and I think it was produced in 1999 and sold in 2003. I bought it, as I said, from Chrono24, and I bought it from an official seller, so Watch Vault NYC. And they sold it to me as mint condition, which it actually was. I was really surprised to see this watch in such great condition, especially as there's a lot of different variations which look a little bit rough, especially as this has an acrylic crystal which gets scratched really easily. As I said, I've bought this one with papers, and here you can see the Omega papers. I'm just hiding the watch number, as you shouldn't really be seeing that. And the caliber number on this one is 3220. I bought my watch for around 1800 euros, but I had to also pay a little bit of an import tax, which bumped the price up to around 2000 euros. Okay, so interestingly, the biggest differences between the Omega Reduced and the Omega Professional was actually the reason why this watch fits me so well. So there's four main parts to this. Firstly, there's the price. Second, there's the design of the dial and the bracelet, the movement, and also, of course, the price. So let's talk about the size. Instead of the rather large size of the Professional, which is 42 or 41 millimeter, I can't really, I think it's 42 millimeters. This one is around 38, 39 millimeters, which in my opinion is the perfect size for my wrist. Of course, this always depends heavily on the lugs. There's lugs that are really straight. On this watch, the lugs are really curved nicely, which gives it a very nice profile when looking at it from the side. What I also absolutely love about the Speedmaster in general is how the side of the case flows onto your wrist. I just love how that looks. I think it sits so nicely on the wrist, and it's also rather thin, even though the movement, as you will see later, is a modular movement. So now talking about the movement, this is definitely a point of discussion for a lot of watch collectors or watch enthusiasts, as this doesn't have the in-house Omega hand-wound movement like the Professional Moonwatch. I say in-house with air quotes because it's actually based on the Lemania chronograph movement, as it has been since the beginning of the Speedmaster model line. Instead, the Speedmaster Reduced, or also called Speedmaster Automatic, is quite unsurprisingly an automatic movement and not a hand-wound movement. As you may or may not know, developing an in-house chronograph movement is actually very time-consuming and very expensive, which is why a lot of different watch brands rely on third-party movements from ETA or various different third-party watchmakers to supply them with their chronograph movements. It might not actually seem like it, but the chronograph movement is a really complicated complication, as it's basically a watch in a watch. So you have your three-hand movement, which displays your normal time, and then you also basically have another watch movement which you can trigger with the push of a button, which then measures the time. And this also leads to chronograph movements having a lot of different parts and being a little more expensive to service. In addition to this complicated movement, adding a self-winding system, as in an automatic watch, really adds more thickness and more complication to the movement. And for this reason, many even very well-known watch brands rely on third-party chronograph movements to power their watches. To give you some interesting examples, the Rolex Daytona used the Zenith El Primero chronograph movement until the year 2000. Even Patek Philippe, arguably one of the best watchmakers of our time, uses a third-party Lemania movement, or used a third-party Lemania movement for some of their chronographs until a few years ago. So to get back to the Speedmaster Reduced, this has a so-called modular movement, which can be easily seen when looking at the pushers, as they are not completely aligned. So both of the pushers are more closer to the dial than the winding crown. This watch pairs an ETA movement with a modular chronograph movement. To be more specific, it's the ETA 2892-82, which is used in more upper class Swiss watches, and it's an extra thin automatic movement. It has been used by a lot of different brands as their movement or as a base for their movement, even brands like IWC and Breitling and of course Omega. So when you would open up the case back, the first thing you see is the winding rotor of this ETA 2892-82 movement. And while this ETA movement takes care of the normal time component of the watch as well as the self-winding mechanism, a Dubois-Deprat chronograph module takes care of the chronograph complication. So next time you see two pushers that are not aligned with the crown, you know that it's a piggyback movement using a modular chronograph mechanism. This of course makes the watch a little thicker, although this watch is pretty thin with 12 to 11 millimeters, but it also makes the watch more difficult to service, as it has a lot of different components and around 45 joules, which is quite a lot for a watch. And even though this is a little bit of a downside, I think the automatic movement is much more practical than the hand-wound movement, especially as a friend of mine who owns the Professional has told me that it's quite hard to wind this watch sometimes. But in case I will ever have to service this watch, I will definitely let you guys know how much it cost me and what the process looked like. So let's get to the design. Compared to the Professional, The subdials of the Speedmaster Reduced are a little more to the edge of the watch, while the Professional, they are a little more close to the center. Other than that, the running seconds on this watch are at the 3 o'clock, while the running seconds of the Professional are at the 9 o'clock marker. What is also immediately recognizable is that this watch has numerals at the hour markers, while the Professional does not. Moreover, this also has a different kind of bracelet, in my opinion looking a little more like a Rolex presidential bracelet. What I mean by that is that the links are a little more curved and not as flat and extended as the Professional. And to be honest, I didn't really realize this when buying the watch. I just thought it had the same kind of bracelet, and I also didn't really pay attention to that. But when it came and I opened the box, I was really happy with it, because I always really loved the Rolex presidential bracelet. I really love the look it has and the feel of it. Now let's get to the price, which is obviously or arguably the most important factor to consider when buying a watch. If you can't afford it, it doesn't really matter if you like the design or like the movement, you can't afford it. And basically you get this watch for around half of the price of the Speedmaster Professional, and I think you get a whole lot of watch for this price. So now let's get to my personal opinion and my experience with this watch. It might come as no surprise, but I really love this watch. I have been having it for 4 months now, and I've really been wearing it a lot. For me, this was really the perfect watch to be my first luxury watch, and it really stood out compared to all the different competitors in this price range. I love the Omega brand, and I also love the Speedmaster. And since I've tried on the Professional once in a boutique, I really fell in love with the model line. And I really think you get a whole lot of watch for the money when you buy the Speedmaster Reduced. And even though this is not the Professional or the Moon watch, I really think that with the automatic movement, the smaller size and the bracelet and obviously the price, this really was a great fit for me and my collection at this point in time. I just really love the dial, I love the tachymeter, I think it's always a nice design feature. I love the bracelet, although I'm not too fond of the clasp, as it's just a normal releasing clasp and not a security clasp. I love the lugs, I love the pushers, I love the thickness and the size, as I said multiple times now. And in my opinion, it's a steel bracelet and a black dial, so you can basically wear it with just anything. The dial is really legible. I've noticed a couple of times when sitting outside in the evening when it starts to get dark and you look at your watch and the time really pops into your face. It's really easy to read the time, which is obvious when you use a black dial and white hands. And the loom is quite nice too, even though the markers are really thinly loomed. But this loom is not really something I'm very interested in. And as this was going to be my first luxury watch, I really wanted something that I can wear as this was going to be my first luxury watch and my most expensive watch, I wanted something that I can wear a lot. I didn't just want to buy a watch to put it into the box and wear it on special occasions, as I think that's just not for me. I like wearing my watch even though I might pick up some scratches along the way. I'm never going to sell this watch as it's my first luxury watch and also my graduation watch, so I don't really care. Yes, I don't know what else I can say. I really love almost everything about this watch. I love the lugs, how they curve around my wrist. I love the thickness of the watch. The domed acrylic crystal gives some very nice distortions and gives it a little bit of a vintage vibe. I have to admit that I already put some pretty nasty scratches into the acrylic crystal, which is kind of a downside of this material as it's a lot more softer than, for example, sapphire crystal. But that being said, you can also easily polish them out, which is exactly what I did. So I think that's it for this video. I really love this watch, and I just want to say that I think this is a great choice to be your first luxury watch, especially when you're looking at something that is around 2,000 euros or slightly below 2,000 euros. So as I said before, leave a comment down below with what you think is the best first luxury watch, maybe in the sector of 2,000 euros or above or below, whatever you want. I would be really interested to read your suggestions. And as I said, if you enjoy this video or you enjoy our content in general, it really goes a long way if you would subscribe and like this video. Especially, as I said, we have some really cool opportunities coming up, which we are really excited about, to be honest. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.